So your biggest, your number one priority is really looking at, as a leader is to get, and as a leader, it's nice to say everybody's leader. So we're talking as a business or business unit leader, as the very top person that's responsible for overall organizational effectiveness. Get your market choices right. You don't want to be the person that chose to double down on the horseshoe factory while Henry Ford was building River Rouge plant. You don't want to be that CEO. And because you're looking backwards and saying, well, it's always been a successful business. It's always been growing. It's always been growing. You do not want to be that CEO. So really getting down, Roger Martin defined 5 interlinked questions. Here's the first 3 of them. But this is really where it starts of going, where will we play and where won't we play? It's really important to identify both of those. Those are kind of like the guardrails, on the sides of the road, with your destination in mind is where we're heading, and your guardrails on each side. It's like, okay, we're not going to play outside of these guardrails, and setting that really specifically. What does winning look like? And that might be defined in terms of market share, types of customers you're working with, types of projects that you're building in market sectors. It might be defined. There should be an element of defining that in terms of a risk and return, to the shareholders of the organization. And then your third question is, what has to be true to win consistently, which usually comes down to it could come down to external market conditions, which you're going to talk to some of those. But also a lot of it comes down to internal capabilities and capacity. So that, as a leader, is your number one priority to make that decision. So, we talked internal for a bit, now we're going to go external. So let's look at the big expanded project value stream. So this is, we talked about the project value stream internally of, prospect opportunity and opportunity to award and award to start, and the construction of the project and the exit, the closeout of the project. So now let's go take that out a little ways and go look at it from the project owner standpoint and go, okay, the project owner, they've got customers that they're serving. If it's Apple, they've got customers buying their product. If it's Microsoft, they've got customers buying their product, using their services and things like that. And say, like in Microsoft's case, where that translates into construction, for a lot of contractors right now, as it translates into data center construction. And so you got the project owner, and they've got to contend with a bunch of things. They've got to finance the project. They've got to get site selection and permitting, and there's all kinds of things way beyond permitting. If they've got to get buy-in from the area, they may have to get power to make sure there's power availability and water availability and things like that. So there's a lot that really goes into that from the project owner standpoint. There's the architect. They got to design the thing, and all the consulting engineers, and then we kind of go down the tract of the contractors. You got the general contractor, the construction manager, and the trade contractors and the suppliers. So it's important to kind of back up and know where the constraint and where the key bottlenecks are within that broader value stream, right? That's outside of, very much outside of the contractor themselves. So I'm guessing you have a story too. I got a couple good stories to tell in here. You got any stories you want to share first on this one?
Well, it's just I've seen more contracts where, actually working with a CEO of a company, and they were absolutely sure that they were going to get this contract, right? So their green funnel, they're like, yeah, we are all in, we know this owner, this is absolutely going to come to us. What they failed to look at was going back and looking at the owner financing, because that thing fell right through, and all of a sudden, right, they had not planned very well, and suddenly they were looking at that was going to be like 50% of their next 2 or 3 years work. And now all of a sudden they had to, scale down their organization. They had to do a lot of things because they had just really, that whole too many eggs in one basket kind of thing. That, to me, that's what immediately, unfortunately, comes to mind when I'm looking at this, and just knowing the effect of all of those things that an owner has and what that really does mean, just right at the GC or CM level, and what that can do to them. So that's where my head went immediately on this one.
Yeah. No, that's a good one. And that ties in. So a couple stories. One, one of our team members, Raymond Braswell, and he he started life as an architect, that was his training, but then bought into a general contractor at, I think, around 60 million a year, and then they grew it to $900 million a year, and did a successful exit of that contractor. And so now he's having fun on his farm and things like that. But that different story, different day. We'll get Raymond on here. But he would go through there and worked with a lot of national accounts and worked with people that were coming to his area or areas of operation, coming into those areas and looking to go build things. So he spent a lot of time cultivating, as the general contractor, cultivating the relationships, though, at the city level, with the economic development councils and things like that, so that when that project owner came, was sniffing around and thinking, oh, we might develop a project in this area, he could be the GC that was making the introductions for them and getting them introduced around town and things like that, which gave him a very heavy competitive advantage, when it then came to selection, how are they going to select the general contractor. So that was, call that, the ultimate in free con, the pre-construction, but the free side of it. But that's the ultimate, is helping connect and helping them with site selection and permitting and just getting to know all the local politicians and things like that. So that's something that definitely took away from it. Another one is a contractor that we're actually helping sell right now, and he was looking, and we have other contractors that do the same type of work. And I would say all of the contractors do that same type of work in similar areas. They all have their operations are all kind of equal, and they should have very equal outcomes from a margin standpoint, from a profitability standpoint. And this client has several multiples. They run actually close to 4x what industry benchmarks are for financial performance, and they run that really consistently. And a lot of that, and it's not because they're operationally more excellent, and it kills me because I'm an ops guy, so it kills me to say this, but they really looked at, he's just good, right? It's like running with your buddy in the woods or something, and and a bear comes after you, and I sit down and put on my shoes, and my buddy says, you can't outrun a bear, and I'm like, yeah, I just have to outrun you. So his operations are good, right? But they aren't so great that it's creating this great financial return. It's because he realized that about half the project owners that he was dealing with, they were struggling with financing on it. So he made some agreement with some local banks and built some relationships there, and is helping them work through the financing of their projects. So about half their portfolio are projects where they helped the project owner actually make their project a reality. And so when you're that person, you're absolutely loved. And in his case, he's a trade contractor. So there's, he's downstream, but he's helping the project owner on the financing side. And that, so he's obviously going to be getting the work. And the project owner is super, super happy with their work and everything, just magically. Their operations are not horrible, but they're just average, right? So, but the project owner is really happy because they wouldn't even be building the project if it wasn't for him. So that's a perfect example of looking external at the extension of your project value stream and saying, where are my project owners? Where's the bottleneck within that market, and where are the constraints? And then going after and helping alleviate that. So
yeah, David.
Back to prioritization.
Yeah, David, isn't there's another story too? I believe that the GC went with the trade contractors and suppliers and said, hey, we need to put as tight a schedule together as we can, because the project owner was building a casino. And so it wasn't about, it wasn't about, I mean, of course it was about the dollar value, but it was more about getting the schedule as accelerated as they could get it, because that was helping the owner with their financing, because they could start turning a profit every day. They could get that job sooner. And a good GC, knowing that that's the market, yes, it's about price, but it's about getting that return faster. And then it all becomes about schedule.
Yeah, that was a super critical one. And that example, that was a Raymond example as well. And I think that one, he ended up, it was a steel fabricator that was the constraint on the schedule. And that one just got lucky and got a steel fabricator from way out of town, not a normal person that would be in town to build that project, but they just happened to have excess capacity at the time that project was going on. And so it was a lot cheaper and a lot faster to go bring in the steel from many miles away and truck it in. But that was the differentiating factor for looking at that. And I watched a data center go out from one general contractor to the other for the same exact reason. It was a constraint. It was a trade contractor constraint, and I think that one was also in steel fabrication as well. And it's about getting creative. It's about getting creative with your suppliers and starting to really look out. It's about knowing what matters to the project owner and when it's price and when it's safety, when it's quality, when it's schedule. What is it? So yeah, there's a lot here, and when like you're in your first two stages of growth, it's just about who's going to give me work and who's going to be able to pay me. That's pretty much, that is your strategy at that point in time. But you should start to think about these things by the time you start to move into stage 3, stage 4, and above, and then it becomes probably very mission critical for your success going from stage 5 to stage 6. So here's one that I know you got a pretty cool story on. You got even some sarcastic emotion and everything behind it, which I think is really cool. Is there's a break-even point and a point of diminishing returns for everything that you do. So 100% is, everybody wants to say zero tolerance, everything has to be perfect, and that's actually, unless you're putting a space shuttle into the air, that should not be the requirement. There's a point of diminishing returns for everything, and that's really at the intersection of like, where do I have inputs and outputs, and there's a point in which the cost of the input cost a lot more than the outputs, and maybe that's an economy of scale thing, and you're going to grow past it. But there's also there's a point in which it's going to have a great return, and there's a point in which it reaches a decline. And so I think you got a good story about a demand from above for perfection.
Oh God, which one? I think I always got demand from above.
The one, perfect compliance. It was
Oh,
it was an HR
that
thing.
one.
You're
Yeah,
scaling, you're ramping
yeah,
up a job. Yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah,
See the
yeah.
smile on your face. Look at
Well, and
that.
again, I
Yeah.
came from
So
a level 6 type background, so everything was at the high end of scales. But yeah, so we had a time when it was all of the I-9 information coming out, right, where you had to fill out the I-9 forms, and really every one of them needed to be correct, certainly on an audit, because I actually got audited one time, and the little Fed dude comes out, and he comes to my office, and he sits down, and he wants my I-9s, and I give him a desk, and he opens his briefcase, and he sets out his badge, and he sets out his gun, and I thought, my God, he's going to shoot me if I don't have all these things right. But it turns out that every blank on these forms is like $1,000, so it can get very, very expensive. So the company had taken a very drastic step, because there'd been an audit and it didn't turn out great, but had taken the very drastic step, in my opinion, that said we need 100% compliance on every single one of these forms, because we're never going to go through an audit like that again. And so the comment back really was, there is virtually nowhere that you're ever going to get 100% compliance, and if you want it, what are you willing to pay for that, and what is the calculated risk you're willing to take, right? There's got to be some sort of program you can run these things through and get at least a 95 or a 98% compliance, but the amount of money you would have to spend to be at 100% compliance would far outweigh the few issues you'd have if you actually got cited on them. So it was taking it to a ridiculous level of compliance that, for one, you were never going to get there without spending millions and millions and millions of dollars just to double check that the spelling is correct and things like that. So it gets back to that, the kind of the calculations we were showing before. Eventually the return you're going to get on it, it just doesn't outweigh all the spending that you've had to do to get there. Somewhere you cross that line back into diminishing returns.
and it's important to know the math on that and weigh out the risk. And it's hard when you just had something, cognitive bias on that is the recency bias, right? I just had this bad thing happen and it cost this much money, and so then since that happened within the last three weeks, 3 days,
Yeah.
3 months, that's gonna weigh really really heavy on my mind. Like I personally made a really dumb IT mistake a couple months ago, and anyways, it was costly and time consuming to go work through it, and I could have this much emotion around it. And we could put some extra controls, and we could do this and that, and know all those things. Truth is, never made that mistake life to date. Nobody else in the company's made that mistake, since 2005. Nope, we're actually just not going to do anything. We're just going to solve the problem and move on. But honestly, for like the 2 weeks afterwards, I was really frustrated and wanted everything solved. So it's just an emotion. It's a recency bias, type, and that's just a cognitive bias, and we have to be aware of. There's like 140, documented cognitive biases, and we have to be aware that all of us have them. Oh, and by the way, if you have a team, everybody has different ones to different degrees because they have different experiences and ways of processing it. And yeah, that all kind of factors into our, as much as we think we're objective decision makers, that's why it's important to have some of the tools and like really sit down and do the math and ask those questions like, okay, bad event happened, we had a claim, or we had this litigation, or we had this thing, but how frequently does it happen? And yeah. So anyhow, super important thing to know. I mean, that's a simple example, but it happens. We watch it happen a ton in growing companies because they will have a process that's a little bit sloppy. I mean, there's always sloppiness in a process. And then they will get bit by an audit or something like that, or a problem occurs, just like the technology one that I just had. And then they go through there and they try and put a process in place that they're over
Yep.
processing it. And that process now at the scale that they're doing it just gradually starts eating away, and it's not noticeable at first, because contractors' bottom line is usually measured in millions, and so now you're just eating it away at thousands. But honestly, do that 10 times, starts to add up. You do it 100 times, it starts to add up even more, and these things build up over time. And they also really demoralize the team, because you have now people working that aren't focused on the bigger things. They're focused on like looking internal and trying to focus on counting paper clips, so to speak. So again, it's hard balance. This is where leadership's
Yeah.
hard.
Well, and it
So
is sorry, I was just
oh
gonna say it is funny that we bid all of our work knowing there's risk, and just calculating the risk and
yeah.
what kind of risk we want to take and what it's going to take to put those resources in place for the risk we're taking. And yet we want to be extreme in other things, even though our literal work is at a risk.
Is that right? Yeah. So anyways, how we manage risks. So just know it's there. We all have our things in our heads, and there is a point of diminishing returns, and it can be actually objectively calculated. So don't bring your biases to the math, I guess.